Welcome back to Helping Skills. This is Dr. Curlin, and this week we're looking at some things we should do to build a relationship with the person we're counseling. And I'm going to start by talking about the material in Collins, Chapter 3. He describes a list of counselor skills beginning with the skill of attending. Because remember, if we don't develop an open, trusting relationship, no one's going to tell us what's hurting them. And even research studies have shown the relationship is more important than the techniques you use or the model of counseling you're using. So we really need to develop our skills. And attending means pretty much what you would expect: paying attention to the speaker, making adequate eye contact, tracking what they're saying, being aware of our own verbal qualities as well as theirs regarding pitch, volume, and speed. Because when you're nervous, you might talk fast. If you're upset, you might mumble. You might be, your speech is affected by your emotional state. And we want to let them do most of the talking in the interview process so we understand the story. There is an acronym that's used about the skill of attending called SOLAR. And what this stands for is that we should sit squarely facing the person. We should use an open body posture, meaning don't cross your legs or your arms. That's a sign, of keeping distance. Lean forward slightly, which indicates you're interested in what they're saying. You need to make adequate eye contact, which demonstrates openness and honesty. And relax and try to make the speaker feel comfortable so that you can begin to engage in this process of counseling. Collins goes on to add a list of guidelines for listening on pages 41 to 42. And we may all think we know how to listen, but listening is really hard work. We need to be aware of our attitudes because that's going to pop out in our body language towards the counselee. We need to focus on the content and the way the speaker is delivering the message. That's going to tell us a lot about their emotional state and even their thinking abilities. We need to check our own emotions as we're hearing this story. And we want to resist distractions. When we're trying to listen to someone and get a story and we're, without putting our stuff in there, it's really difficult to stay focused. We daydream. We might start thinking about something else. We need to keep ourselves focused on what they're saying. We need to be asking or using little prompts and probes to encourage further sharing. And remember, we can think faster than someone speaking, so we can tend to leap ahead, answer questions, and solve their problems instantly, and then we lose track of what they're saying. We do need to ask questions, but we don't need to be like a drill sergeant, and we don't need to be ghoulish asking about gritty details just for our own curiosity, but we do need to get the whole story. We don't want to interrupt or lecture during this beginning of the interview, and we are listening for themes, emotional states, the values of the counselor, as well as the content of the story. We want to get the whole picture. So we need to use some other skills in our interviewing, and Collins calls this set leading. All our authors might use different terms, but they're going to discuss similar skills. So we need to use open-ended questions. We don't want to say something they can answer with yes or no, because we want them to keep telling us, keep talking. We'll use some skills that we're going to practice, like we want to summarize what they say occasionally. That helps people organize their thoughts. We want to use leading comments like, and then what happened? We want to reflect content and emotions back to them. We want to rephrase, Scheidler calls it parroting, back to them what they just said. That lets a person feel that they're heard. And we want to use a skill of immediacy, which addresses what's going on between ourselves and the counselee. If they seem to be withdrawing or shutting down, address that and say, I feel like you're withdrawing from me a bit. Have I said something that's offended you? That kind of a thing. That's what immediacy is about. Collins calls the skill supporting. Jesus told us to be like the Good Samaritan. So people need someone to listen, someone to be a support in their time of trouble. And that's, one big aspect of counseling. Influencing skills, he lists some more techniques that we're going to be practicing and learning about. We've already mentioned restating, paraphrasing, and sort of summarizing what people are saying. That helps them feel heard, helps them organize their thoughts, and encourages them to keep going. We want to give feedback. When it's appropriate, we need to make small self-disclosures. Remember, this is about their story, not us. We need to make interpretations. That's one of the most difficult skills in counseling. We want to make suggestions and give information at the appropriate time. We want to talk about consequences at the appropriate time. And sometimes we have to be confrontative or directive. It depends on the situation, depends on the person, how confrontational we should be. Some people need a lot. Some people will weep if you just hardly do anything. So be sensitive about the person. It's one reason why we do a assessment first, get to know the person before we leap in with those things. And I'm assuming you're going to be working with someone for more than a 20-minute conversation. Because counseling, usually you might see someone quite a few sessions. Collins also talks about teaching, which is also a part of biblical counseling, because we're going to show them what the Bible has to say about the topic that they bring to the table. And we can also help people sometimes just by explaining why they're having such negative emotions. In the secular view of counseling, we would call this psychoeducation. In biblical counseling, we'll just call it a form of teaching. For instance, when we violate our conscience or the values that we know are true, we're going to feel this angst or struggle within, and it's going to affect our mood and our well-being. So sometimes people have inner conflict. They know they're doing something that's wrong, but it's awful hard to admit it. But as you develop expertise with depression or other problems, you can also help people understand what they're going through. It helps people to know that depression has physical side effects along with the emotional ones. It can help people feel a little less anxious to understand those things. Well, let's talk more about listening. Think what it really would be like to listen to someone for 45 to 50 minutes in a counseling session. Your job is to get them to express what's bothering them, in more than one sentence, of course. We already mentioned that we can become bored and daydream or anticipate their questions. We can jump the gun before the story's out and rush in with the wrong suggestions. It's really difficult, harder than you might think. And think about encoding messages, sending it, and then receiving it, which is really what speaking and listening is about. For instance, when I say a dog, imagine the animal you're thinking of. We might be thinking of very different animals. I might be thinking of my pet golden retriever, while you as a listener are thinking about a big German shepherd who's always barking and showing its teeth. So when we have big differences in concepts beyond that simple example, the message that's being transmitted may not be received and decoded adequately by the listener. So that's a problem when we're hearing someone and when they're sharing their story. Be aware that that interview and getting the whole story takes a bit of time. Scheidler mentions that we do need to listen for the content of the story, the feelings that they're sharing, and the values and beliefs that underlie those things. And as we are listening, we're going to be probing with some questions to get at those things. We're going to be searching for values, asking them, well, what do you think? What do you think the Bible says about dating a married man, or whatever? It may not be something that simple, but we want to get at their beliefs. Maybe they have all these expectations about what their spouse should do that's based on what their father did, that kind of thing. So when we're listening to people's stories, we do need to share with them sometimes that when we are in harmony with our conscience, when we're in harmony with God, we're going to feel pretty peaceful. But when they don't line up, we're going to have problems. And our thinking doesn't just stay in our brain. It affects our body. It affects our ability to think clearly. Our emotions are connected to our thoughts and our physical body. And it leads to social ramifications when we have inner turmoil. And it can affect our relationships. And we need to always remember there are 3 people in every counseling session. They are you, the counselor, and the Holy Spirit. And we need to be attuned to what the Holy Spirit is telling us. And a lot of times you're going to be praying silently, oh, God, help me know what to say. Okay. So people are going to come and tell you they want to change, but they'll resist telling you the real problem sometimes. Sometimes they're embarrassed or ashamed. They fear more rejection. And it's embarrassing to say something, that you've done yourself that is wrong. So they'll need to build trust with you and see if you're competent to know what you're doing. So we're always listening on more than one level. We're listening for what's missing. Skill Builder 3.4 has you practice thinking about what might be going on under the surface. And your author disclosed some misses he had, where one person even committed suicide and another one left preaching and his family and fell into addictions. He stated he was not listening and hearing deep enough. So it can happen to everyone. And counseling is, like Collins called it, discipling. So we need to be aware of the goal, and we need to help the counselees set goals. Where do they want to go in counseling? What is the goal? How will we know when we're done? When there's goal setting to be done, and Scheidler has a whole chapter on this, we have to help the person plan their actions or determine what those actions should be. So sometimes through this process of talking, people start examining their own thoughts, and they start realizing maybe if they just confess the sin, or maybe if they grant forgiveness to someone, that's going to be their pathway to healing. But it doesn't always, even though we all know we need to do these things, it doesn't come easily and doesn't always come instantaneously. And sometimes we just don't see what the problem is, which is why we go for help to you, who are going to be their wise counselor. Scheidler says we also need to remarry content and emotion. So that means we might have been saying, and that makes you feel how, or how'd that story make you feel, or you're telling me that your daughter was very rude to you last week, etc. So if the person has, I don't want to do that. Well, Scheidler goes on to talk about advanced listening skills in Chapter 4. Here not only are you asked to hear what the counselor is saying, feeling, and believing, but you're supposed to make the connections for the client, which he calls remarrying emotion, content, and values. You have lots of little skill builder exercises which are helpful, and I'll help you do them. I hope you do them. I haven't required all of them for assignments, but it's really good practice to write them out. So let's try this one together. Suppose the counselee is telling you, "My daughter refuses to come for Sunday dinner and bring her family. We moved here just to be near them." As a counselor, if you're remarrying content and emotion, you would say something like, "You're feeling hurt because you think your daughter doesn't care about you or is rejecting you despite the sacrifice you made to move into a new town to live close to them." So you're really just kind of summarizing by trying to identify the emotion that's coming across. Another simple example might be the counselee's telling you, "My parents told me they're getting a divorce even though they pretend to be Christians." So you might say something like, you're feeling hurt because not only are they getting a divorce, but they're acting in ways that go against what they've taught you as a child, or something similar. We want to help them make those connections. Again, Scheidler's big on the goal setting, and he talks about some stages in the process of counseling that you can read more about in your text. And he talks about why sometimes people don't seem to have appropriate emotions based on the circumstances they're in. In the midst of trauma, sometimes people will laugh, get hyper, just be unable to process information because it becomes so overloaded with fear in the moment. But afterwards, we expect the person to be able to look sad when they're grieving or smile when they're happy. It doesn't always work if it's been a big trauma. And sometimes there's an absence of emotions, which can indicate a problem. So Scheidler lists 7 reasons why feelings don't seem to track with circumstances sometimes, and it could be a history of trauma or a history of some kind of abuse. Maybe they're depressed. Spiritual warfare could be involved. Maybe there's unconfessed sin in the picture. Maybe they just don't trust you enough to share that way. They could have a brain chemistry disturbance. That does happen, unfortunately. Or maybe they are involved in some occult practices, or, those have been part of their past, and those are making an impact on how their thinking and emotions should be connecting with the situation. Well, I'm attached a document that explains some of these listening skills a bit more, and I want you to practice these with your family this week. We're going to work on these more when we get to the Learning Lab section, but try some of these out and see how they work. Do you know what an open-ended question is? So when we're seeking clarification in the story, we want to clear up ambiguities, and we might say something like, "Do you mean that?" or "Are you saying this?" Plus sort of rephrasing what the client is telling us. So that really does help. It encourages more elaboration. We're going to check the accuracy of what we've heard, and we want to clean up any vague messages for the counselee and for ourselves. And we need to be thinking to ourselves, all right, what has he or she told me? What am I missing that I need to check out? How can I see or grasp this in a way to ask my question in a good way? Do you mean this? Are you saying that? And how will I know if my clarification is useful to the person? Hopefully it's going to help the person elaborate it, think more about it, and just continue with their narrative. Paraphrasing or parroting, as Scheidler calls it, is another way of helping people and being good at interviewing. So that is really just restating what they've said briefly. Maybe someone's telling you all about, the problem they have with their son, and you're going to just rephrase occasionally. It's like, it seems like you're saying your son is not doing well in third grade, but he did really well in second grade. And then that helps them keep going, yes, and I think it's all the teacher's problem, or whatever. It helps them go on with the story. So just interject those every now and then to keep the story going. And sometimes if they get off track, you can put things, what you're saying is second grade was good, third grade was really bad, but when he got to fourth grade, that's when he improved again. So you try to keep them chronologically oriented, because it's confusing if someone doesn't relate a story in order, so you can use your paraphrasing skills to help them sort things out. In your head, you're, again, trying to translate what they've told you into your own words and make sure you're receiving the message they're transmitting. An interviewing skill that our authors talk about, and they call it by various terms, but it's reflecting feeling. We want to encourage the client to understand their emotions and to express, get those out. Not that we want them to scream and cry in front of us, but to understand what they're feeling, because our feelings get all mixed up in our head. We want to help them manage those feelings better and understand how they're connected to what's happened. And so when someone says, I was so mad, we want to reflect it back by saying, I hear the anger in your voice. We just want to use a different feeling word, because that helps them understand their emotions more. So it's good to know lots of emotion words. We're all surprisingly a little bit emotionally illiterate. So again, we need to be asking ourselves these questions in our head. What are they saying? What is this feeling I'm getting? She's saying she's angry, but I sense underneath she's really been hurt badly. So you can, I hear you saying you're angry, but I sense this pain underneath that your heart was really broken in that situation. That kind of thing. You're really helping people make sense of their story. And there's skill builders about those in your book to complete. And then summarization is just what it sounds like. We want to tie together multiple elements of their messages, and then that helps us look for themes or patterns, underlying issues. And sometimes if someone's just rambling, it kind of helps get them on track. And we can also review progress. It's a really good way of ending a session too. I said, well, today we talked about this, you told me this, and is that accurate? We want to review progress, and we want to check with the counselee that we've got the story right. So we're going to try to summarize about the content, the values that seem to be important, the feelings that they are experiencing, and make sure that we are understanding the situation and our client. An example of summarization might be, I'm glad you shared your situation with me, Rhonda. Because of lots of family conflict, you feel you don't belong with your family of origin, and you wonder if this is why you're avoiding making friends now. You're feeling lonely and disconnected, and wonder if you can ever feel like you belong somewhere. Does that seem like I'm getting your story accurately? That's one example of summarizing. So again, try these out. If you've got someone to practice with, a spouse or a friend, I put some starting statements just to get your mind working. Of course, you can use your own ideas and use some of these probing, some seeking clarification, some summarizing when they start telling you a bit of a story that they make up or a true one. reflect the emotions using different emotion words. Try practicing some of these. They are good skills to have, not just for counseling, but in all your relationships and even at work. If you're a good listener, you will be a very popular person. Everybody wants to be heard. Well, I have rambled on long enough about this. Again, look at the lecture notes that I've uploaded and the document about these counseling skills. I guess I didn't put lecture notes. I am going to put this PowerPoint up there so you'll have it if you want it. Well, thank you for your attention. I pray everyone has a great week.